Declassified, where we go behind the scenes of your favorite true crime content and creators. Today, I am chatting with Dying to Be Found, a true crime podcast hosted by Deb Norman. Deb is a true crime enthusiast and host of a podcast that promises to bring you the most gripping true crime stories. Thank you so much for joining me, Deb.
Thank you so much, Megan. I am so excited to be here. Not going to lie, I'm a little nervous because I'm at the opposite end of this interview today.
Well, I cannot wait to hear more about how you got into true crime. And I'd love to get started with what got you interested in true crime?
When I don't really know how to answer that because it goes back a really long way. I have always been a enthusiast on reading books and such. And I remember way back when I was probably kindergarten. I can remember the house I was in, and I literally read this series called The Bobbsey Twins.
Mhm.
So it goes back. It was mysteries. My sisters were a little bit older than me, so they read a lot of the Nancy Drews and Hardy Boys and things like that.
Yeah.
But it goes back a little ways, and I even remember when I was in elementary school, the librarian had a special stack of books just stashed away in the back of the custodians, wherever they keep their
Mhm.
mops and things. And I would go to her week by week and just pick up a big group of books and go take them home and read them. But it's just where it comes from. I really can't say for sure, but I've always loved to read mysteries. And then, of course, as time goes on, you've got all these true crime shows like
Mm.
Criminal Minds um, and Dateline and things like
Yeah.
that. So it really depends on the storyteller.
Mm.
And I really, really love those stories. So I don't know. I just think that I am really intrigued with the psychology
Yeah.
behind how people think. And that's kind of where that comes from.
Yeah, so it's always been kind of a part of your life, and I think the true
Hmm.
crime podcaster definitely has a specific mindset. So you
Yes.
decide that you want to create a true crime podcast. How did you come up with the concept of Dying to Be Found?
So when I was trying to think of the name of what I was going to go with, I am a marketer by trade.
Mhm.
And of course, I know just from doing that for a living, you have to be pretty creative with it. And I started off not really understanding which direction I was even going to go. I just knew I was going to start a podcast. And I really think it's all in the name, Dying to Be Found. There's so many different interpretations of that. There are unsolved cases where you have people that are dying to be found.
Mhm.
You have other cases where the criminal is
Mhm.
really toying cat and mouse with the police, and yeah, they want that notoriety, but are they dying to be found?
Mhm.
Absolutely. So it kind of goes along the aspects of whatever your interpretation is as a listener, or even me. Some of the cases that I do is not always about really high profile true crime cases. A lot of it has to do with something just odd behavior. Like I did an episode one time where it was a train sabotage
Oh,
and the
wow.
person has never been caught. So it's not always about what you would think true crime is about. I actually do quite a bit of documentary style
Mm.
episodes. And yeah, so it's all really in the interpretation of who's listening to the podcast, and whatever my listeners are looking for, I will absolutely look into. I love those requests that come in, and I will absolutely think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so you left it very flexible for yourself then to
Mhm.
talk about the cases that are important to you.
Mhm.
Is there a particular type of criminal case or type of true crime story that you find yourself gravitating to the most?
I think I've been in this for a year, and I really think that over time, Megan, I'm migrating towards the unsolved cases
Yeah.
because there's just no answers there. And some of these cases are 30, 40 years old, even longer sometimes. But I personally am getting a little connected to the stories that I'm telling. And I feel that it's really important to give some closure. I know there's really no such thing as closure, but I try to find more answers. And if I can bring up a case that is 30 or 40 years old, then maybe somebody knows something. You always have that fresh eye when you have cold cases and it gets put on the back burner, but then you have new investigators that come in
Yeah.
and they're the ones that may see something that the original investigators may not have seen.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I migrate personally. That's my personal opinion. And I have a ton of my family members that come on with us.
Mm.
So I'm always telling them different stories, but it could be that they're drawn a little bit. You'll see in season 2 of Dying to Be Found how that works because I've discovered the pattern amongst my family members and what they're migrated to. But me personally, it's really more so the missing persons case and the cold case is unsolved.
I love how you get your whole family involved. I think that's amazing. Have they also always been into true crime, or is that something that you got them into?
I think that it just depends on the family member. My
Yeah.
sister grew up in the same household. We discovered when we first started this podcast together, my sister Beth, we discovered through conversation just last year that we had that same obsession.
Oh,
So that's where
wow.
that comes from. My daughter probably saw it from being exposed to living with me, and then my son, he's coming on board during season 2 and he actually works in law enforcement.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, it's just
Do you find that he has a slightly different mindset then towards it because he's got that experience?
I think so, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring him on board is
Mm,
because, first of all, I want a man's perspective on things
of
because it's just
course.
been me and my sister and my daughter, but I wanted that exposure as far as the man's perspective, but I
Mm,
also wanted the law enforcement perspective on it. So, I mean, he's been probably in law enforcement, I would say 2 he had his 2-year anniversary. So
amazing.
he's still relatively new, but he's seen enough to know. And yeah, his personality type, he's really dry and he thinks a lot of
Mhm.
people are like, "Oh my gosh, crooks are stupid," sort of thing. So you never know what's going to come out of his mouth.
I love that. And so you have an exciting new podcast series coming up called Dash, and that's one that I've personally been on. So thank you so much for having me on that.
Yes,
Can
absolutely.
can you tell me a little bit about that series?
So I came up with this concept really around Christmas time because first of all, I had a lot of time on my hands. But I also reflected on how year 1 went, and our 2nd year anniversary or our anniversary going into 2nd season is February 15th. So, I kinda wanted to take a different spin. My sister Beth has stepped back a little bit because she has a business that she just started
Mhm.
up, so she's busy. My kids are busy, they have lives. This is my hobby, and so I thought, "Okay, let me put a rotation in on my family members so that they are not having to do this week after week." But the dash, the original concept was that, okay, let me just play with doing some solo episodes all by myself. And storytelling is kind of different than like today I'm talking to a human being, we're interacting together, but my concept of the dash originally started with, okay, let me just tell a story. It's going to be a quick story, 15 to 20 minutes, just enough time to get somebody to work, however long your commute may be. And so I've already recorded my very first episode that will be dropping in just a couple days. And
So exciting.
yeah, and I think it really turned out pretty well. I wanted to toy with things. I do have that creative mind, so I'm going to be playing with some music. People may or
Mhm.
may not like it. It could be distracting. I want to hear that. Like, what's
Mm,
working for you? I also wanted to try that concept of just telling a quick story just for the 15, 20 minutes, but also by myself just to kind of branch out and see
mhm,
what direction that goes to. However, I have spoken with you numerous times, Megan,
mhm.
and I have also been on other people's podcasts, but I thought, you know what? This would be a really great way to expose other podcasts to people that might be listening to me because there's so many out there. We know that it's a really big genre. very
Oh, yeah.
popular. And so I just reached out to multiple podcasters that I listen to, and the response, Megan, has been amazing. I've already recorded all the way into September's
Oh, wow.
episodes. Yeah, so those are a little bit longer because what we do is I'll interview you, give you guys a couple questions to answer, and
Mhm.
then I turn around and do my little dying to be found spin on it, and then I tell you guys a story. And you said that, yes, you have already done that with me. I think that it was an amazing episode.
Oh, I loved
And
it.
yeah, and so it's probably a 15-minute interview session with podcasters, and then it's another 15 to 20-minute storyline. And
Mhm.
that's really the concept of the dash. So they're not as short as I thought they were going to be, like the solo ones that I'm doing. But let me also mention
Mhm.
that the more podcasters that are interested in coming on and highlighting their podcast to the community, the less you'll have to talk to, the less you're going to have to listen to me all by myself.
Well, how did you find that, doing the podcast by yourself? Was it quite a different experience to doing it with someone else?
I think it is a little bit different. It's odd because I'm not talking to somebody. I don't
Mm.
have that feedback that you normally get. And what I find a lot of the time is that what my concept is of the storyline that I am telling, my co-hosts have a completely different spin on it,
Oh,
and you'll
yeah.
hear me in my podcast say, "Oh my gosh, I never thought of that." So that's what I like about having the interaction with the co-host, but I
Mhm.
really do like just telling a story and
Mm.
getting the feedback later so that if you're listening to it on your drive in, then you can say, "Hey, I listened to that story today and I just wanted to say this is what I think about it." So, yeah, it's a little
Yeah.
bit different, but I do like it. It's just different and unique.
Mm. I think the community aspect of true crime is kind of always there, whether you're a solo true crime podcaster or whether you do it with a friend or whatever, a family member. The community of true crime I've just found astounding, especially coming into it. And I've only really been in the world of true crime for since I started my PhD, so about a year ago now. And
Mhm.
that was the thing that really stood out to me the most, how amazing this community is.
Mhm.
And that's what I think is so special about true crime is the community around it.
It is very supportive, and we all have different spins on how we communicate,
Hmm.
but you're right. I don't know if you belong to the Instagram group. I don't remember if you are or not. I
Hmm.
personally belong to an Instagram group where there is constant chatter going on, and we are all over the world, not just in,
Wow.
in the US or wherever, but it is just an amazing group, and we're very supportive of each other. I love that.
Mm. Oh, that's lovely. And so, talking more to your personal experiences, I would love to know if your professional or personal experiences have shaped you as a true crime podcaster.
I think so, Megan. Yeah, I'm not a professional podcaster in any means. I mentioned that I have a day job, and when I was looking at my episode lists, we've talked about the diversity in our topics, but also what I find too is that there's a big difference between watching true crime stories,
Mhm.
or documentaries versus listening to a podcast or even reporting it, because I think when I first started, I thought, okay, I can do this. This is going to be fun and entertaining to be, and even a way to be with my family members because we're so spread out. But the more I looked into this, it can work on your psyche a little bit because it's completely different when you are actually reporting what you have
Mm.
to say. But you and I personally have talked about ethics in
Yeah.
reporting. And I'm going to tell you that is one thing that I have really reflected on quite a bit since we
Mm.
talked. And I think that's why I've changed things up a little bit. I've realized I don't have to add every single detail. One of them
Mm.
being names. Do I really have to put everybody's names in there? Because I know that there is a social stigma that is entertainment,
Mhm.
but I'm trying to get away from that aspect of it. It's more of a informational. And I'm not even going to say infotainment here. It is an informational, and a lot of it is the documentary style. of the things
Mm.
that I do. And the ethical portion of that, again, is I don't have to say every single name. I don't have to give every single detail because I'm very mindful. And your podcast has helped me with that because there are victims that are still out there. There are family members that are still dealing with these things. So to me, I think that my style, as far as personal experiences, I'm developing.
Yeah,
And
of
I'm
course.
only a year into this myself. So it's shaping me. I think it's shaping me into being a better reporter and just being very mindful that there are still victims out there. Does that
Mm.
make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think from my kind of experience of true crime, I found in the beginning that I was gravitating towards the sort of, really horrifying stories, the really gory stories, the
Mhm.
podcast that told you
Yes.
everything. And I
Yes.
realized that that didn't sit right with me. And now I find myself gravitating more towards the podcasters who I find that I like to listen to. It's their personalities, I think, that draws me in. And so I think
Yes.
that's one thing I'd say to kind of any true crime podcaster is that, the draw of your true crime podcast isn't how horrifying the stories are or how much detail you put into it. It's you as a person. And I think that's what makes
Mhm.
true crime podcasting stand out from true crime. You mentioned other forms of true crime, like, documentary filmmaking, the series that we see on Netflix and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
I think they should be treated as so separate to podcasting because it lacks that real human element that podcasters
Mhm.
give true crime.
Yeah. And 2, I make sure that I find as many reputable sources
Hmm.
as I can. There are a ton of let's just say they're tabloids or just, if I don't recognize them to be a good resource, I don't use them. And that too in itself, you go to one article and then you find another article that goes with it. But I think too, you have to be really careful with where you are reporting this information from. So, because it's really about integrity. Are
Yeah.
you in it for entertainment purposes? I hope not. Are you in it to be informative? I hope so. So, along with that, you've got to do your research.
Definitely. And as you've been researching into these different true crime cases, is there a particular case that has really stuck with you, and why is that?
I think I have several answers to that if you have a moment
We've got
because
all the time.
yeah, I have several. And the first one, I think it was episode 6 of the first season and it's Alison Botha
Mhm,
from South Africa.
mhm,
Oh, I think I found a documentary on Netflix about her and this is just a survivalist story. It is a story about a very strong woman, and I'm already getting choked up thinking about this one because, in my eyes, Megan, Allison is a superstar. If I were to have anybody on my show, I think she would be the
mm,
person I would love to interview because she went through a lot. She is so strong and she's out there helping people and she's not afraid to tell her story. So,
mm,
Allison, I'm already getting goosebumps thinking about that one. But she is just a wonderful human being and just a role model for humanity.
mhm.
And the second person is actually out of the UK, who is Sarah Everard.
Yeah.
I don't know how I stumbled across this story. I felt that this one was really important for me to tell my daughter because a lot of it is, okay, I'm going to educate my daughter today and kind of give her a jolt
Mhm.
because she needs to be aware about certain things. But Sarah Everard, edit that out, I hope.
Yeah.
Um, she unfortunately was walking home one night and there was plenty of CCTV footage that everybody knew what happened rather quickly, but
Mhm.
to me, it kind of leaves things open to question about everybody and anybody that you're interacting with. And if I'm not mistaken, just based on the research that I did, this was a profile case.
Oh, massively. Yeah, massively. I mean, Sarah Everard, obviously, it happened a couple of years, a year ago or
Yes.
so now. It's still
Not very long
relatively,
ago at all.
yeah,
Yeah.
still relatively recent. And oh gosh, just I think every single woman in the UK has I think that story has really changed us as a nation. I
Yes.
hope it's changed us.
Yes, and
Yeah, it really has. And I think we saw Sarah Everard's case unfold as it was happening, and to hear about all of the details of it and who did it, and potentially why they did
Mhm.
it, and who we can trust from that. And then following on, when we had the vigil that was unfortunately not handled very well by the police, and the kind of fallout from Sarah Everard's case, I think it is a really poignant criminal case in British history, because it's
Mhm.
kind of held a mirror up to A, how safe women feel in the streets of the UK,
Yes.
and B, the response to violence towards women in the UK. I mean, I
Yes.
personally had male friends reach out to me and say, "Look, I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" Because it was the sort of case and the sort of attack that
Wow.
every woman in the UK could look at and say, "I've had some sort of similar experience that could have gone in that
Wow.
direction as well." So you're completely right to bring that one up, because it is such a powerful, powerful case.
Mhm. Yeah, and through that research, I actually found several other stories somewhat
Mm,
connected to that, and I have offered several different names, several different cases along with that one. So yeah, I did not realize that was such a big, I'm not going to say problem, but it's a big challenge in the UK, and
yeah,
it's about awareness. That's why I brought that one up, and that one really resonates with me
mhm,
because of the trust issues attached to the whole case. But
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Now, the third person I'm going to say is Meredith Emerson.
mhm.
Now, this one hits close to me personally because I literally live 1 hour from where her story takes place.
Oh,
And
wow.
I live in Georgia, United States, but I live in North Georgia, and the mountains are at an hour driving distance. But the thing about this case is that I don't think it really needed to happen. Meredith was up in an area where there are a lot of hikers,
Mhm,
and so there were people that saw her on the trails. I've been hiking on those trails. I'm near the Appalachian Mountains in the foothills,
mhm,
and there was a Dateline special quite a while back. I didn't even realize when I was watching it because I had never heard of that case before.
mm,
But as I watched it, I realized, oh my gosh, this literally happened one county over from where I live. And uh, she's Meredith, another strong case of a fighter.
mhm,
Unfortunately, it didn't turn out in her favor, but it just really hits close home to me because of where I live.
mm.
So I think that usually when something like that happens, you just have a little bit more, what would I say, that just awareness that
Yeah,
goes
I
along
think
with it.
it feels more real. I don't know about
Mhm.
you, when a case
Yes.
proximity of criminal cases, it almost reminds you that every person that you speak about is a
Mhm.
real person, and it is such a stark reminder that these sort of things happen all around us. And it's not about fear
Yes.
mongering or anything like that, but it is about raising awareness for
Mhm.
the victims who have previously not had their stories told in a way that is beneficial to them as victims. I mean, I think often when we talk about media and how journalism responds to criminal cases, definitely a different approach to true crime. And what I hope true
Mhm.
crime can do, and what podcasts like you do, is really center the victim in the storytelling. So yeah, you're
Mhm.
completely right that proximity can really yeah, make criminal cases feel different.
Yes, and, along the lines with that, the person who abducted Meredith literally was in the town where I live now. I know
Oh,
the
wow.
bank that he was seen at, and, I know the area pretty well of where he was caught, and this just didn't need to happen. There were so
Mm.
many signs to say that this never should have happened in the first place, but, yeah, I feel connected, especially to Meredith, because the mountains that she was taken from, I see them every day. When I drive home from work, if I'm driving to just go to the grocery store, I see those mountains. And honestly, Megan, there is not a day that goes by that I
Mhm.
do not see Megan.
Oh.
Sorry, see Meredith.
Yeah, yeah, it's such a stark reminder. I know the case for me personally is the obviously disappearance of Madeleine McCann being from Leicester,
Mhm.
and
Oh, yes.
That's one that obviously was all over the news. I was younger at the time, but even now, it brings your kind of home county or hometown and city into the media for all the wrong
Mhm.
reasons. And
Right.
there's definitely a different feeling towards those criminal cases. It almost feels like though you didn't know them, you knew them in some way. They represented where you're from. Um, yeah, it's interesting the way that criminal cases feel, entire countries away from us and they're so distant to us, and then it's almost brought back into focus very quickly with the ones that are so close to where we actually are based.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think part of that too is, like you said, it does not always bring certain areas to a positive light,
Mhm.
but with Dying to Be Found, those are the stories that you don't want to fall to the wayside. You want to keep the awareness alive in that aspect.
Mm, definitely.
Yeah.
So speaking of Dying to Be Found, I would love to know, how would you define your podcast in 3 words?
I think it's pretty diverse. Like I said, we do documentaries. I do regular cases of missing persons, unsolved, things like that. And we've done cases on poaching, which I thought was
Oh,
really that
really?
was one of our earlier episodes. Yeah, because there's criminal activity. It's
Mhm.
not always grim, but I'm a personal animal lover.
Yeah.
And so animals are victims too. So
Mhm.
I had done that episode on poaching, which was really interesting. I'd also done one which really was it solved? Yes, it was the 1996 Olympic bombing in
Mhm.
Atlanta. That one came really close home to me before because I was in that area just the day before, maybe 2 days before that happened.
Oh, wow.
And then I had just taken a trip up to Washington, D.C. a couple months ago. So I wanted to do that Amtrak sabotage.
Mhm.
So it's diverse. I do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. On season 2 with a dash, I'm actually going in the direction of the more hopeful stories where
Mm.
things are solved. And a lot of it, Megan, is through familial DNA.
Yeah.
And some of the cases, I'm trying to make them as uplifting as I can, but to have a happy ending, sometimes you just have to do that. So
Mm.
diversity is one of the words that I would say. Informative, because I am a researcher at heart.
Mm.
I have received my doctorate as well. I know what it's like to have to do research day after, I don't know, 17-hour days, maybe.
Yeah.
So informative, and that's just my brain anyway. I have a dry sense of humor.
Mm.
I'm very, I don't know, I have a business mindset because I do teach business and marketing. So that is kind of my mindset, and I'm always in the educational mindset anyway. So informative, different ways to come across as far as that storyline. And the last one I love to say is open to interpretation. I know that's not one word, it's three
I'll let you
words,
off.
but thank you. But yeah, open to interpretation being in the name itself. And I think I explained that a little while ago. So yeah.
Oh, amazing. And I love the fact that you cover all types of criminal cases. I think when people think of true crime, they go straight to the big serial murder cases. How do you find people respond to the different types of cases that you cover? Do you find that people are equally as interested in the poaching cases as they are the missing person cases?
That's a really good question because I don't know what you do with your data, but I do
Mm,
look and I analyze. And I would say there's a pretty healthy interest in everything that we cover
mm,
because not everybody wants that grim side of true crime. And a lot of it people don't even know about. I did one on DC snipers,
mhm,
which was in the news. A lot of it, Megan, came from my personal experiences of what has been reported in the news over the last couple decades. But yeah, it's a healthy balance on what people are listening to. And I would say that probably the more higher profile cases are the ones that probably get the more listens.
mhm,
But then again, it just depends on what you want to listen to.
mm. And to anyone looking for a new true crime obsession, what should they expect from Dying to Be Found?
Let me think about that for a moment. I think that just basically, if you have storylines that you want to listen to, I am happy to drop everything I'm doing to report what you want. And
Mhm.
just to expect in the coming season, you're going to get different family members. I had a cousin that I was talking to recently. He actually expressed an interest. So Joe, if you're listening to this, then I will be calling you. We did talk about that. And so extra family members, and other than that, I mean, you just have a different variety of what's coming up.
It sounds like you've got a really close connection to your listeners and that you want them to get involved and send you stories for things. How would you describe the relationship with your listeners?
That is an amazing question. I think that it's respect.
Mhm.
And a lot of it is that in the true crime community, there's so much communication going on between podcasters, but with my listeners as well. I get feedback, just basic little either comments or just depending on what I post on social media. I can see what interests them. So the relationship with the listener is that I'm here for you. I want to report what you want to hear. And I don't always do those ones that are you can hear on every other podcast around town. But it's just basically respect and the ability to report in a way that it resonates with you. So as a listener, I appreciate every time that you do even just put a little like in the comments. You don't even have to say anything. It tells me that I'm doing something right.
I think we've got to a really interesting point in true crime where the Ted Bundy stories and the Jeffrey Dahmer stories have been told so many times that people are looking
Yes.
for more of those personal, maybe those smaller criminal cases that have
Mhm.
kind of gone under the radar for so long that, yeah,
Yes.
we're kind of moving away from those big, high profile crimes because they've just been retold so many times.
And they have, and it's not always in a good way. I think it's just a moneymaker at this point. If they're still talking about those same cases, I don't think I mean, I'm never gonna say never, but
Mhm.
I don't believe that I will ever cover those 2 cases at all because they've been done so many times. Everybody
Yeah.
knows what happened, and it's just not really my genre.
No, I think that's why the Netflix series on Jeffrey Dahmer felt so unnecessary because it's just been done so many times.
Mhm. Absolutely. There's definitely a lot of information out there that we can certainly go back and take. It's just a modernized version of it, same
Mhm.
information. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So before we wrap up today, can you share your social media handles so people know where to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the tricky part here is that it's if you look at my logo, it's dying to be found, all written out, and the handle itself is at dying the number 2, the letter B,
Mhm.
found. And of course, that's just the shortened version. But like I said, the tricky part. So I was setting up my Gmail account, and for some reason, I did have dying to be found all written out, but I have to this day not been able to access that. And
Oh
that is
no.
why I had to do dying the number 2, the letter be found at gmail.com. Because who knows? I'm pretty technically savvy, but for some reason, Google will not let me in. But you can also find me on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and Pinterest. For anybody out there, lots of different audiences for each one of those. And yeah, as far as where you can find the podcast itself, I'm on Spotify, Apple, Google, anywhere that you guys get your podcasts from. I'm on iHeartRadio and Pandora, all those different places. So you just Google me. I've Googled me, and you will find my podcast.
Incredible. Well, thank you so much, Deb, for sitting down and talking to me. I love the concept of
Absolutely.
Dying to Be Found, and I'm so excited for more Dash episodes to come out. So, yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, and if I can just put a little pitch,
Mhm.
if you are a podcaster, a true crime podcaster, or in the true crime industry, you don't have to be a podcaster. I would love to interview you on the Dash. And Megan,
Amazing.
thank you so much for having me today. This was a really good conversation, and I just appreciate the friendship that we've built over the last several months and being on your show today.
Oh, thank you so much. I had such a lovely time.
Yeah, me too.